Hello everyone, my name is Sydney Maynard. I'm a junior at NYU studying journalism and media culture and communications, and I have the pleasure of introducing journalist and author Imma Vitelli, who is back with us for her second dialogue of the semester. Last month she presented The Stories We Tell, reporting on the war and the dehumanization of Muslims, in which she discussed stereotypes of the Arab world and how those stereotypes prompt reporters to portray Muslims as agents of violence and religious fanatics in order to gain readership. Tonight, she will share her experiences as an interviewer and talk about interview techniques. Tomorrow, she will hold an interview technique workshop for students at 4 p.m. in Villa Sassetti, and if anyone is interested, you can sign up after the talk. Imma received her master's degree in journalism from Columbia University in New York and is now an international correspondent for Vanity Fair, Italy. She has covered the 2006 33-day Israeli war against Lebanon, the Arab Spring in Tunisia, and conflicts in countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Somalia, and Israel. Please welcome Imma Vitelli.
Hello. Hi. Very happy to be here again. To talk about the interview. Now, I think the first thing that I need to tell you is that it sounds like something for journalists, but in fact it's not. Because if you think about our lives, the stories that we tell, not necessarily as a journalist, you can be interested in fiction or non-fiction, but if you think about anything you want to do really in life, most of the time it will involve talking to people. Right? Don't tell me stories about digging data, going on the internet. Of course you need to do that. It's important to do that research. But then at the end of the day, if you want to be a storyteller or if you want to be able to talk to somebody and extract either information or feelings or wisdom of any kind, you need to know how to talk to this person. If you're in the business, to be more specific, of journalism, storytelling, or even fiction, I would argue, then you have to know that the interview is the pillar of your house. It is really what holds it together. If you do not have in your notebooks good interviews, then you don't have the pillars that will hold your house. Because you can write about anything, really. It could be this campus. It could be an institution. It could be a vase. It could be really anything. The stock market could be something as dry as you can imagine. If you do not have the people, their emotions, their lore, their traditions, their secrets, then the story won't come alive on the page. So you really need to master the art or the craft. I think it's an art, but people call it a craft of the interview. I think it's a bit of an art and it's a bit of a craft. It's a craft because half of it is mechanical. It's fairly easy to master. But half of it is what your gut is telling you. It's about awareness. It's about instinct. And of course you can learn that too, but you need to practice and practice and practice, and with time you'll get it. Let's start with the craft. It's pretty straightforward, right? What you need is, number one, a lot of pens. A lot. I mean, I can't tell you how many of my colleagues show up without having a pen in there. It's embarrassing, okay? If you show up to an interview, you don't have a pen or a pencil, it's very embarrassing. And then you'll need a notebook. And then, yes, a tape recorder is also useful. Yet, I would recommend that tape recorder is there as a backup. Because you know why? You're going to go home and you're going to fret about your tape recorder, thinking, damn, my tape recorder didn't really work. And you're going to go home and maybe your tape recorder is mute. And you think like, ouch, that really hurts. And you're going to be fretting all the time because your tape recorder hasn't recorded everything and you haven't taken one single note down. No, you want to be a writer? Write things down. It's important. You can't keep up because your guy or your woman is talking too fast? Raise your hand and say, please, sir, I really need to jot this down. Interrupt. It's okay. This person will understand. This is about the craft, straightforward, a lot of pens or pencils, a notebook, and the tape recorder, possibly a reliable tool, okay? This is just the basics. Now, who do you interview and why, and how do you choose them? You see, you want to do something about this campus, for example, about the history of the campus, maybe, or about the gardens. They're beautiful, right? And maybe you want to find the keeper of the garden. Or maybe you want to go beyond the campus and walk across the street and find the baker, who maybe bakes the bread that you're eating every day. You want to find someone who is somewhat important to the universe you're inhabiting, interesting or unusual. Someone possibly who can share a wisdom that not many people are familiar with. It could be really anyone, because we all have secrets. And your talent will lie in extracting those secrets from this person. You need to figure out what you want to know from this person pretty fast. And what is this person holding that could be a mine? It's about mining, really. It's not about data mining, but it's about mining for tips or hints or emotions or just things you never thought of. Now, having ascertained that you could really talk about anything and anyone, I would like to share my first story, and I don't know how to get there, but just to give you an example of how you go about this. I think it's good to be practical. We'll never get there, and we're stuck with the brother of Barack Obama, but that's fine. I normally travel, and I'm a foreign correspondent, but every now and then I get assigned to do a story in Italy. It doesn't happen very often. It could happen every, I don't know, 5, 6 years or so. So 3 years ago, there is a earthquake, disaster. So I'm the gloom and doom woman. There is a quake or a disaster. The editor thinks, like, Imma is in Rome, you know, she can go there and cover this thing. It's like, okay, quake. And I'm like, a quake in Emilia? The only thing that my editor says is the word earthquake. Then I have to figure out what to do, right? In the meantime, I work for a weekly. Which means that every single television and newspaper and magazine in Italy and even abroad are there in Emilia, because it's a serious thing. And I'm probably the last one because I landed 2 weeks later. So a lot of it has been published already. And the only assignment that I have is quake. I have to cover a quake. Now, the quake has hit and devastated the province, which means 50 towns and 500,000 people. And I still have to figure out what I want to do and where I want to go for a reportage to be effective, because I have to decide, first of all, who I want to talk to and why and where. I mean, you know, it's like you having this blank page and someone says a word and then you have to design something. No, the gorilla, no, that. We're going to get there. Just be patient. So there is this quake, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? And I scratch my head, and I start studying and reading homework. You have to do your homework. You have to study. It's very important. And I pretty much realized that I needed a town that could be this microcosm through which I could describe the desert. And we had the workshop about this. It's just like a place that basically had all the dynamics and all the devastation and destruction that went on, you know, all over the province. But in one place, I could show what it felt like, what it was like, what it caused, what it felt. It was very important. So I do some research. I found this place. It's called San Felice, 10,000 people, 3 churches that went down, the 3 major churches. The center is leveled, including the clock tower. That was the pride of the town. The old castle, the old Rocca also was not in a good shape, and the vultures, the television just placed this camera waiting for it to collapse. They were literally waiting for the castle to collapse with the cameras. So I'm there, and what do? You have devastation. You have destruction. You can describe rubbles. You can figure out how many displaced are there, how many people died, right? This is what you can do. But then you need people that bring the story alive. Where do I find them? So I thought And this is really kind of a blueprint, okay? You need to think, okay, small town, 10,000 people, who could be the movers? Who could be the people that can share some wisdom? Who could be the people that my characters? You need an environment and you need characters, people to interview. And so I thought, okay, number one, I need the mayor, because the mayor knows what's going on the ground and how he's reacting, how the government is reacting to crisis. Number two, I need the priest, because the priest takes care of the soul, and this is a Catholic country, and so the priest will pretty much give me some insight and maybe also tell me whether there is anything going on that I need to know of. And then I thought, okay, the hospital is not really functioning because there are no wounded. There were 3 dead in the town, and so I can't go to the hospital. I'm not going to get anything. And I thought a pharmacist would know, because people buy medicines. It's our first reaction, right? It's like something is unwell, either doctor or pharmacy. I mean, you know, we need, it's a consolation in a pill or something. I thought a pharmacist is a good idea. So in the end, the pharmacist, I'm sharing with you my line of thinking so that when you have a universe to investigate, you can be creative with the characters that you can find, right? Pharmacist is like, let's see, how many pharmacies are in this town? And I'm like, okay, there are 2. Where were they? They were both on the main piazza, in the main square of the town. And it's like, what's this place? Piazza Matteotti. And they're both there. Where are the pharmacies now? Oh, no, they're now in a container in the school courtyard. Ah, very interesting. So let's go to the school courtyard and talk to the pharmacist. And there I found my main character of the story. But this is how I got there, right? Step by step. And I didn't know I didn't even know Mr. Bertolli existed. I just went by intuition, trying to find characters I could talk to. And there he was, this 74-year-old guy, old man, in this container. And he was right there, and he was the portrait of despair. And he told me that he had been in that pharmacy for the past 40 years. And he looked at me and like, look at where we are now. That's already a quote. Look at where we are now. I'm landing. I'm an outsider, and I'm landing in a disaster zone. And I have a character that tells me, look at where we are now. And then I asked him, you know, what was the biggest loss? A quake, a disaster, a place that has been leveled. It's about a loss. In terms of human psychology, in a story, what you want is the emotions. You can describe the number of buildings that went down, but then what will bring the story alive is the emotions of these people went through this. We're going through this. We're living it. I need to take the hand of the reader to this place. And I need the reader to understand how a doctor, or anyone really, is doing in these kind of terrible circumstances. And so I asked the doctor, what will you miss, doctor? 40 years in the same square, Piazza Matteotti, and your pharmacy is down. And he looked at me and he said, you know, there was once the arcade, and when rain came, people just stayed there, waiting for the rain to stop. And you know, right across from my pharmacy, there is a clock tower. It was so beautiful. It's no longer there. And you know, in that clock tower, there was a blackbird. And that blackbird every morning showed up in his nest and chirped. And that would be the beginning of my morning. That's what I'll miss. Now, I started with this doctor because he was a poet, because he just gave me the measure of this tremendous loss that this one town across one province was enduring and feeling and living. The blackbird of the clock tower was no longer there. Now, your story is going to be as good as your characters. your story is going to be as good as the questions you ask. You can be sitting in front of a genius, but if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get anything in return. It's a good technique, I think, to remember, in case you miss something major, and it does happen, to ask at the end of every conversation, am I missing something? Is there anything I should have asked you and I didn't? Is there anything in our conversation that I'm really missing? Or just simply, it's like, okay, what else do I need to know and I have no idea and I'm lost here? Just tell me. It's good because most of the time, a lot of time, not most of the time, but a lot of times, if you ask that question, all sorts of stuff will come up, and a lot of times, the quotes that end up in the story come just spontaneously. It's like, is there something I haven't asked you? Yeah, you know. And there it starts. It's just precious. I'm telling you about the quake because, again, I had this enormous assignment, and in the end, I just narrowed down and narrowed down and narrowed down, and it was about characters and find the right people to interview and then being able to extract whatever wisdom they have or poetry or emotions they have. And they went straight into my copy. And the way it goes straight to your copy, and this is very important as well, is by recording the language they speak. In Emilia, they speak a very peculiar Italian. You know, they don't have the S, they have the Z. I wrote it down the way they said it, the way they spoke, because that too brought me there. The language of it could be the language of a trade, a doctor. In that case, you do need a tape recorder because I get lost when doctors are talking, you know. But you do, because it's the human detail that brings the story alive, you know. And in this place, in San Felice, when I had to do the quake, sometimes you also need to get lucky because another major character that I really adored, that basically, you know, in the end, I closed with the guy and it was, well, I don't know, 3 or 4 paragraphs. It was because in the end, after going around and interviewing different people and falling in love with the pharmacist and going to the camps of the displaced and finding out that people from southern Italy were with people from Morocco and they were the same. And then there was like a bridge, right? Southern Italians and Moroccans are the same. I asked the Moroccan guys, like, who cooks here in this camp? It's like, my wife. I asked the guy from Napoli, okay, who cooks here in the camp? My wife. It's like, very well. And they went straight the way it is because it just showed how alike we really are. In the end, I was like, okay, I kind of explored enough the trauma of the living. Let's go out and find out how the dead are doing, because the newspapers in Italy were saying the cemeteries were also destroyed in the quake. It was part of the news coverage. And this cemetery also lost, I don't know, 3, 4 precious pinnacles. And I was like, okay, the cemetery of San Felice, let's check it out. So I went to the cemetery. And there I found this amazing character. It was the keeper of the cemetery, who was a gay Buddhist keeping the Catholic cemetery of San Felice. It doesn't get any better than this, right? I couldn't believe it. The guy was the only one sleeping in his bed. Everyone else was terrified. He didn't care. He was there. I knocked on the door. 4 p.m. he was asleep. Everyone was really heavily traumatized. It's like tents all over. They weren't sleeping in their houses because they didn't know what the damage was. It's like the cemetery hit twice within 3 days. Bang, 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 niente. And I'm thinking, the keeper of the cemetery must be on a holiday. And then this guy opened, all disheveled. I was like thinking, who are you and what do you want? I'm like, hi, reporter. He talked to me because I was really low-key and humble and cool. He was not intimidated by my, presumed status or anything. And so I asked him to go to the toilet. It's very good when you're interviewing people on a story like this to go inside, because that will provide details, anecdotes, description, because you'll need description, you need to describe the place. You need to take the hand of your reader with you there. And so I needed to pee, but I probably would have faked it if I didn't. So I asked the keeper whether I could go inside, and he said, yeah, sure. And I went to his toilet. Hello. And I went to his toilet, and I discovered there was this enormous gay poster in the bathroom. And I'm like, this is, and I thought, this is pretty good. It was already, this is a Catholic cemetery, okay? Catholic Church, Vatican, Rome, okay? So the first information, okay, the guy is gay, very well. And he's sleeping while everyone else is kind of neurotically frantic, and okay, very good. And then I go down, and I'm like, you seem to be very relaxed. I say, yeah, my house is one piece. Yeah, what's there to fret about? It's like, whoa, the city is down, it's level. Yeah, but we only had 3 dead, and I could die being run over by a bus tomorrow. And I'm like, that's a good point. And then I'm like, and so do you think that people are just too anxious for no reason? And he's like, listen, I'm a Buddhist. And that was the second information. You're gay and you're a Buddhist. I was very happy, okay? I was very happy. And because up at that point, I had the emotions, the beautiful pharmacist, the poetry of the blackbird. I had the mayor and was overwhelmed. I had this destruction. I had the priest, the souls, and our history is gone. Churches are down. Our patrimony vanished. Is in dust. It's like, okay. But then came this character, who was completely different from all the other characters. His sarcasm was almost kind of overwhelming. I'm like, oh, wow, where are you? You seem like an alien. Who are you? And he's like, you see, I'm a Buddhist. Yeah. And I can say that here, most of people, have their Buddhity, and I do believe in Buddhity and enlightenment, up there. Yeah, I won't say what he said. It's like, yeah, unbelievable, This is okay, the city's done, what to do, it's life, we're all gonna die. You see, my dead are here, they're doing well. All of this went straight. It's like, I wanted to just write the story about the keeper, the Buddhist gatekeeper of the Catholic cemetery, but I couldn't have done that because my assignment was the earthquake. And so why am I telling you this? It's like, sometimes you find the liveliest encounter in the least expected place. But you need to go there. You need to explore. You need to keep your options wide open. Because otherwise, if you are kind of faithful to your preconceptions, or to whatever it is that you think already, and it's going on, and you think, okay, I'm going to get this from this source, I'm going to get this from this other source, your story is going to be as dull as your biases. So if you really want to get into this business, forget about your biases and your preconceptions and just explore, because you will be rewarded. The major reward that I got in my life as a reporter, as I was mentioning earlier, I got it just because I do my homework. And you need to do your homework. You really need to do your homework. If you do have an assignment, you just need to, plunge into it naked. You just need to try to figure out and read everything you can, and watch all the movies and documentaries you can, and read nonfiction and fiction together, because very often you'll find, the grasp of it more in a novel than in a nonfiction book. And so this is even more true when you cover something that is not your usual bit. In my case, I'm an expert of the Middle East, but sometimes I get assignments in places that are not my turf. And so how do I prepare? I just kind of pile books and docus, and I talk to people, and I just try to understand where is it that I'm going. This is really important. Back in 2008, I got one of those calls. Back in 2008, Barack Obama, as I mentioned, was running for president. It was pretty clear that he was going to get the nomination, the Democratic nomination. and my editor calls. And I'm in a pool in Indonesia, having the time of my life with a monk. It was beautiful. I was learning how to do meditation in moonlight in Java. And my phone, and my cell phone rings. And if it's the editor, you have to pick up. And I'm there in Java, in this most unlikely place. And the editor is like, it's June 2008. And he's like, have you been following the American elections? I was like, yeah, it's exciting. The pool is better, but yeah, it's exciting. And it's like, Barack Obama, yeah, it's very exciting. You know, we should do a 3-part series looking for Obama in Kenya, Honolulu, and Chicago. That's very exciting. Then I was awake and I was with him. It's like, Kenya, Honolulu, and Chicago. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this looks exciting. It's going to be a nightmare. A nightmare. I mean, the guy's been senator, and it's like thousands of journalists have written about the life of Barack Obama. And I'm here, the last one, who's here in a pool in Indonesia, who's an expert of the Middle East, and he wants to send me to do this. And I have to be for a month on the road trying to figure out who's Barack Obama. I had the whole film. The whole film was like the amount of books that I had to read. And, you know, I mean, it's just like if you want to break some grounds on trying to bring a fresh perspective on something that it's not part of your turf, it means a lot of work. So, so I said, sure, what a brilliant idea. Yeah, let's do that. And I went back to Beirut. I was based in Beirut. Again, I'm a woman based in Beirut. There was some sort of displacement. Got in the phone call in Java and preparing to go to talk to Grandma Sarah. Grandma Sarah, the grandmother of Barack Obama. And I'm thinking, ouch. Ouch. I mean, you know, how many people have written about this? I mean, I went back to Italy. I kind of looked around the press, only the Italian press, and there were stories after stories. I'm like, I cannot get to the Lake Victoria and come back with an interview of Grandma Sarah. I can cut my wrist right now, you know. I just like, I'm bored. I can't do that. But I said yes, and I will do it. So I did. And of course, I started reading the autobiography, Dreams from My Father. And so every single book that I could order, I ordered, and I was reading like a mad woman. And then I landed in Nairobi, and then I took the plane to Gogelo, and I went to Lake Victoria, trying to think of, you know, a different angle. What different angle? 5,000 newspapers wrote the story. What different angle? It's like, but in the meantime, I kind of had a map in my mind of the whole family, which was anthropologically very interesting. The father of Barack Obama had 4 wives and 8 kids. And it's, you know, it's this polygamous African thing. It's quite the norm in Africa. And so I was like, okay, the 8 kids, where are the 8 kids? I was trying to figure out. And then I go to the Lake Ogelo. And of course, everything was, I saw it in countless pictures. There was grandma, there was his uncle Saeed. They were there, they were fed up. Can you imagine people fed up with reporters? You know, 5,000, it's just too many, you know, too many of us. There's like answers become kind of formatted, you know, what do you want, everything becomes the same, and I don't get the little nuggets you're after, you know, the little emotion. It's like you need something that is fresh and new, and so I'm there. And Uncle Saeed pays attention to the photographer. He doesn't want the photographer to take certain pictures. Grandma Sarah tells me a few things, and then there's this kid. I call him a kid, but he was 26. That's him. And they introduce us, and he says George, and there is a little light in my head that goes off. George. George. He's the only one no one has ever written about. He's George. He's the last one. He's the one whose father died when he was very little. George. And then George had something about him that was so sad. He was the saddest young man I ever met. He was there. He was very thin, emaciated. He was there playing with this corn. There were chickens around. Uncle Saeed didn't want me to talk to George. It was obvious. Again, you need to be aware of all the dynamics. You need to be aware where you are. You need to be aware what's going on. If you want to play the game, you just need to know how to. So it's pretty obvious from the way Uncle Said is looking at me, talking to George, that Uncle Said doesn't want me to talk to George. So I want to talk to George. And so I'll tell the photographer in Italian so no one would understand. I'm like, take Uncle Said somewhere, pretend to shoot him, take him a picture, I don't know, get him off of me. I said, okay. So I have a few minutes with George. And George is pretty obvious that he's traumatized. I mean, he just moves like he's walking in a minefield. It's pretty obvious. He says very few things. And then he looks at me and he smiles. And I'm like, what you're doing here? Just here from the weekend. And I'm like, this is good. And then where are you going back to? To Nairobi. When? And I'm like, this is good. Okay, do you have a phone number? I'm trying to basically get an appointment with him in Nairobi without Uncle Said around. He scribbles down a phone number. He says, yeah, sure, call this number. There is something, there is a secret in this guy that I need to unlock. He might be, you know, my way out of this nightmare that is the story that everybody's reported. So we go back to Nairobi, and I interviewed Auma, the sister who's very media savvy, sister of Barack Obama. She's very media savvy. She says the right things. She knows how to, you know, nothing remarkable. But, you know, I was duly doing my job. You need to do that, too. You need it. It's copy. It goes in the store. And then every day I keep calling the number. No one picks up. And then day 7 in Nairobi, I can't really justify staying in Nairobi. And I keep calling the number. In the end, one guy picks up. And his name, I'm not... I'm not lying here. He says his name is Osama Obama. And I'm like, Osama, but I'm looking for George. Yeah, my cousin. Okay, he gave me your number. Yeah, what do you need? Him? Okay, I'll call you back. Bang. Now I'm staying in the Stanley. Other 2 days go by, no one calls. And I'm like, I was like, what am I supposed to do? I keep calling. No one picks up. In the day, it's like, basically I was about to leave. I mean, I'm staying at the Stanley, I'm with the photographer, the money's running. My editor at a certain point will ask me, what the hell are you doing in Nairobi? And I was like, and I'm like, there is this kid, just my gut is telling me I need to talk to this kid. Anyway, the kid calls. The kid calls back, and there again, waiting and patience, and waiting and patience, and waiting and patience is the key to unlock whatever secret it is that you're trying to unlock. People said eventually that I got lucky. I just waited and waited and understood that something was there. So the guy calls, hi, you've been looking for me. Yeah, I'm here, I want to meet you. Where? Your place? No, your place. Okay, come to the Stanley. All right, so he comes to the Stanley Hotel. And again, he's there, and he's a bit uncomfortable. And he looks like a guy who kind of lives off the street. And he doesn't really want to talk to me, but because I don't question him, I don't attack him, I'm really cool. I offer him a beer. I'm like, how are you doing? How's life? I take my time, you know. Sometimes the best interviews are about timing. You need to know when to step back, and you need to know when to step forward. If you step forward too soon, you're going to lose it. That's about the arty part that I was mentioning at the beginning. Sometimes the best interview is about you giving up. You give up and the person comes forward. It's a dance. So I was there, hanging out, having a beer. They said, okay, what can I do for you? And I was like, I want to talk to you. I was like, I'm here. Yeah, well, why don't you take me to your place, a place that is really dear to you? And he's there, and he doesn't know whether to trust me. And then he's like, okay, I'll take you somewhere tomorrow. You're taking me to your place? I'll take you somewhere. He doesn't say anything. The day after, he takes me to a place. It's not his place. I wanted to go to his place. He doesn't take me to his place. All the questions that I'd asked kind of float in them. It's like, what do you do? Nothing. Do you go to school? Not really. Where is your mother? In Australia. Are you alone? Yeah, I'm alone. Have you ever met, you know, your half-brother in America. Yeah, twice. Once I was very little. Second time was 45 minutes. He was in a tour in Africa with the cameras. The day after, he takes me to a place. It's a nice place by a river. It's not his place, though. It's the place of the ant. It's a place where he goes and has coffee and tea. He wants to show me his better part. He wants to show me that he's not doing that bad. But then the moment the photographer sometimes needs to be kind of beautiful, you know, kind of sanctified. It's like a long life to photographers. The photographer takes him away, and the aunt, I didn't do anything again. It was about access and being in the right place. And the aunt, she's, I don't know what to do with this kid. God will forgive me. I had to kick him out. The drugs. You know, he was stealing money. What am I supposed to do? The gangs. The gangs? Yeah, he's part of this gang in Oroma. The drugs. I think he shoots up. Look at his feet. I'm there. Don't say a word. The photographer comes with the guy. And I'm like, okay, let's go. We're in the car. And I'm like, okay, George, I like you. You're cool. Take me to your place, would you? Bottom line, he takes us to Huruma. Huruma is one of the slums of Nairobi. 500,000 people, mud, holes, you know, like 2 by 3 meters. It's like as awful as Africa can be. All in a sudden, I had this story. An half-brother, the youngest one, living the African nightmare, and the American was living the American dream. It was just, I was like, the moment I stepped into Ruma, I was like, okay, I'm feeling better. And we're there, and it's like, I live like a recluse. No one knows about me. When they ask me whether I'm a relative of Barack Obama, I say no, I'm ashamed. The story was republished today in Vanity Fair because, of course, no one had ever found this guy before, and everyone had been investigating the life of Barack Obama. It became a major issue because the Republicans in Texas used as pictures to attack Barack Obama, and Condé Nast in America sued the Republican Party. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is because, again, if you do your homework, you know what to look for. If I hadn't read all those books, I didn't know that of the 8 children of Mr. Obama, there was one that was never covered. And there was a reason why, because the family tried to keep him off the limelight. So whenever you're interviewing someone, you need to go to the catacombs and really do your homework. That will spare you a lot of humiliation also. I remember the first time I went to Afghanistan, I was really lucky. The Italian ambassador was very kind. It was my first time. I'd read books, but I was it's my first trip. I didn't really know where I was. The Italian ambassador was really kind, and he invited me to this party with ISAF people. ISAF is NATO in Afghanistan. And so I'm there, you know, and I'm really happy and excited because it's an environment that I don't know, and I'm getting to know all these people. And there was a top general of ISIS forces in Kabul, in Afghanistan. It was a British man. I hate him, and still today I hate him with a vengeance. But he looked at me. We had a small chat, and he looked at me, and he's like, "You don't know anything, do you?" It was pure humiliation. I mean, I was there. It was my first time there. It could have been nicer because I was a complete beginner, but he was right. So if you do not want to be humiliated in the middle of an interview, prepare. And prepare the questions. And prepare a list of questions. And then be prepared also to forget them. Because maybe the person that you're interviewing might take you on a different tangent, might take you somewhere else. And this place this person is taking you to is more interesting than the questions that you have in your mind. take it. Just go there. Do not hesitate. Follow the emotions. It's not trivial what I'm telling you, because I had to learn this. A lot of people, what they do is, again, they arrive in a place and they're just filling the gaps. You know? Okay, fireman, doctor, hospital, whatever. And then they have that, and they miss, you know, this enormous gold mine that maybe opens in front of their eyes. They don't see it because they're so focused in filling their own gaps. Get excited. I think it's the most valuable piece of advice that I could give you. Be prepared to be surprised. Do your homework and be prepared to be surprised all the time. You see, if you don't do your homework, you're really going to miss the story. And if you're not ready to be surprised and to go to places where you did not want to go to, again, I don't know, here. Okay. You're not going to have a story that will come alive. And so, oh no, I wanted that, I like that woman. I really like that woman. And so sometimes they're going to ask you, if you're doing journalism, they're going to ask you to write about a building, or maybe they can ask you about to write climate change. The reason why we don't care about climate change, I think, is the fault of scientists, because scientists really do not know how to talk to reporters, and I experienced this just recently. You know, amazing things are happening, not amazing, horrible things are happening to the planet that we don't know because we don't read the stories. And why we don't read the stories? Because they're boring. Because they don't capture the attention. Because there is no human element. Why should I read something that reads like a science class in high school? Why don't you try to move me? Why don't you try to show me what people are undergoing? What's all this about? So a few years back, I decided to do a story about climate change, and I decided to do a story about sinking islands, climate change refugees. There were some islands off Micronesia were going down. Can you imagine? This is the fate of about 200 million people. It's happening within 50 years. A lot of low islands that will disappear, modern Atlantis. Can you imagine? They've been there for thousands of years, and all in a sudden, they will be gone, bye-bye. Now, you could write a dry story about these lands going underwater, and people will yawn, or you can try to find the people that live in these lands and trying to capture what this experience exactly means for them. This woman, for example, and here we are in the Carteret Islands, and the Carterets are off Papua New Guinea, and they went down. They went down. And when I went to see them, there were 400 people living in 6 little atolls. And whenever there were high seas coming, their pots were floating in the ocean. It was very vivid. But then again, what do you write about? You arrive there, and again, it's about the people. It's about the people, and sometimes it's about getting access and getting to the people. And sometimes access is the hardest part, and you have to figure out how to get there. And in my case, it's like, can you imagine this? The islands are going down, it's 6 islands, 400 people. There was not one public kind of boat or ferry or anything. I had to hire a banana boat to get there, 6 hours in the ocean, with a captain that was drunk and tried to steal my computer. This is access, okay? This is getting the access. What, do you want to kind of put some blood in a climate change story to understand what it really feels like? Okay, that's what it means. Getting a drunk captain in Papua New Guinea who wants to steal your computer. And then meeting a woman like this woman who was 90, and she lived all her life on that island. Other people were relocating in Papua New Guinea. The church was giving them some land, you know. Some of them were excited about progress and globalization and having toys for their kids. The only thing the kids had to play on the island, and I didn't know what there was because they looked like little balloons. They were condoms. The church had delivered these condoms to the people for them to use, as condoms. And the people didn't use them as condoms, but the kids kind of filled up them with water and used them as balloons. And that was the only gift the kids had on the island. I thought there was a little anecdote that told you a lot about being isolated in this place. And most of the people adored the place. Some were excited. And most of the people adored the place because the place represented something that we were going to lose. It represented traditions. They believed in spirits, They believed in rituals. So when I asked them, and again, I asked them, okay, we're losing these islands. Most of you will relocate. This old woman, she was 90, she said, I'm going to sink with my island. I'm not going to go. I am going to sink. Here it was about access. It was about finding this old woman that tells you about loss and what it is. And what was it that she was losing? She was losing the thumb, the headstone of her husband that the sea was washing away. But she wasn't going to go. I asked the chief of the village, who was very angry at the West, because the West produces all this pollution and then it's them who do not pollute at all or going down. I asked him, okay, you guys are here isolated, you have nothing. What's the big deal? I didn't really think that, but I wanted to provoke him. Sometimes you have to provoke. And he starts telling me about the Sisane. The Sisane are the houses of the old rituals. It was like opening an anthropological book. Kids at 13 in these islands are taken to the jungle and taught by the elders how to be independent and autonomous, how to be entrepreneurs, how to survive on their own in the jungle, how to forget about their parents, how to be men, how to talk to the ancestors, how their spirits were hovering over these Sisane, these houses. It was not all in a sudden a story about climate change. It was a story about lost traditions. And only those interviews could bring them alive. People normally want to talk to you. If you are interested in their lives, people will share their secrets, but you need to be respectful. And you need to understand who they are. And you need to kind of have, heart. Take heart, I think, is the biggest advice I could tell you in the art and craft of interviewing. Sometimes you'll have to be very aggressive. When you're talking about politicians, people in power, forget about taking heart. You need questions and you need to push, and you need to push hard. Harass them as much as you can, because they won't give you any heart. That's not what you're after with them. You need a quote. You're going to try to get it, and you're going to push as hard as you can with politicians. With victims, a lot of my colleagues, unfortunately, do the wrong thing. With victims, I don't know how many countless mics I've seen, how many mics I've seen under the nose of people who don't deserve a mic under their nose because they've gone through a tremendous amount of shock and trauma. This was the Carteret Island. So when you're talking to politicians, it's okay to be as aggressive as you can. But if you're speaking to someone who's lost a tremendous amount, then sometimes in your interview, you won't need anything. Sometimes it will be about stay silent. You'll stay silent and just wait for people to talk to you. You will be there, and maybe your notebook will be in your pocket for a long time. And then you'll take it out only if you really feel there is a quote that you need to write down that you'll forget. Because there are moments when there is something that goes beyond your job, and that is humanity. You have to respect the right of broken people with your silence. And this is something, because your story is going to be powerful anyway, because what happens when you respect the victims is that the victims want to talk to you. I can't tell you how many times I've seen colleagues who would run after them and then they would run away. And I would just stand there, my notebook in my pocket, not say anything. I would just stand there. And sometimes I would stand there for hours. And then slowly but surely people would come and talk. Just because I waited. Just because I had respect. You see, this is a little bit, this takes a lot of practice, and it takes awareness, and it means that you need to know where you are. Here, it was excruciatingly painful story. Here we're in Baghdad, we're in a mental hospital. And again, access was a problem. This mental hospital, it was all over in the newspapers, produced 2 suicide bombers who blew themselves up in a market in Baghdad. They blew themselves up, and then all over the newspapers the morning after were 2 patients from the Rashad hospital were suicide bombers. And I was like, the horror, the horror, the horror. And I'm not based in Baghdad, I was in Beirut by then, and I'm like, no one is going to, like, they're putting this institution like that, and they don't try to go to the hospital to try to see A, whether it's true, B, what's going on, C, what is this place, what kind of desperation is producing 2 women possibly mentally ill to blow themselves up. This is the kind of questions that you always have to ask yourself. Why is this person doing whatever it is that this person is doing? Where is this person coming from? What is there that I have to understand? What is the scream that I'm not hearing? I went to the hospital, and just to go to the hospital, back then my magazine had a lot of money. It reminded me of a scene in Spotlight. Again, if you want to pursue a career in journalism, please do watch Spotlight. Because in Spotlight, the guy, the main reporter, I identify with him a lot. He just gives a guy $87 to use his copy machine in a tribunal. Here, I didn't invest $87. My fixer, without me knowing, invested $1,000 to get access to the mental hospital, and I didn't know. And there was like, I had no idea. But then in the end, I knew that he bought like 3 pairs of shirts and trousers, and I don't know, and a mobile phone. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, what are you doing? But anyway, we went there. And I didn't once take my notebook out. The first thing that I saw was this guy. There was a hole in his smile, and his name was Mahmoud. Not because I asked him, but because as soon as he saw me, he was like a broken recorder. It's like, Ana Mahmoud, Ana Mahmoud, Ana Mahmoud. I'm Mahmoud, I'm Mahmoud. I mean, he kept following me and repeating, Ana Mahmoud. So the moment I stepped into this place, I knew where I was, because Mahmoud told me, right? So if there is a guy with the hole in his mind telling you, Ana Mahmoud 3 times, you know where you are. And immediately you know that your tape recorder and your notebook have to stay where they are. You take it out and you change dynamic. You're there more as an anthropologist. You're observing. And then I sat and I saw this place. There were a lot of plastic roses and incongruous alpine landscapes on the floor, on the walls. And there were 13,000 patients and 1 doctor who was not there that day. It was really a valley of tears. And then slowly but surely, the chief nurse told me that people were abandoned there. Like some people in the summer abandon pets on the way to their holidays in Italy. They would go somewhere and just leave their daughter there. Half of the patients were actually, sane, in fact, but just didn't have a place, and they needed a refuge from war. And then there was the other half who was in a very bad condition. I mean, they were giving them electroshocks, and I've seen the machine. They showed me the machine. So I'm there, and I'm dealing with it. And then there was this television in a cage, because they told me that it wasn't safe to keep the television outside of the cage. Yeah, this was the electroshock machine, and that's the television in the cage. Now you're asking, if stories and interviews are what you need to bring a story alive, how did you manage to write this story? Well, the story started with Ana Mahmoud, Ana Mahmoud, Ana Mahmoud. That didn't require an interview. And again, had I started taking notes or interviewing directly people, they would have pushed me away as the ajnabi, as the foreigner that I was. And then in the end I sat, and this woman, and then they came to me. They just came to me. They came to me and they told me their stories. And one of them told me that, you know, my brothers, they were using the knives at home, and I didn't want to be there. And so I asked my mother to take me here. That went straight into my story. I didn't have to ask one question. I didn't need to. It's important to understand who you're dealing with. Otherwise, you will ruin that moment, that encounter, that precious access. The same thing happened in a rape hospital in Congo. There were all these women all raped, and my photographer was there, and I was like, take the camera away. And the women were like, we don't want to talk, and I'm like, I understand, I'm going to take a step back, you don't have to say anything. The moment I took the step back, the woman came to me and he said, no, let's talk. It happened in Bangkok last week. I was in Bangkok last week. There was this woman, she was recovering from a surgery. She just changed sex. She was a guy, and now she's a woman. And she's Italian, and I'm Italian. So everyone is going to read the story in Italian. She knows that. And she said, you know, I just did this thing. You know, I'm still here. I don't think be in the newspaper right now. And I looked at her and I said, okay. And then she paused. Okay, let's have a seat. It's important that you show respect, because respect with victims or with regular people will open the doors. Had I pushed it, and I said, oh, come on, let's talk shit, I would have lost her. But I didn't do it, of course, by now I learned, but I didn't do it premeditating, because I knew how to, I mean, put yourself in their position. If I'm a guy who just had a sex change operation, and I'm going back to Italy, and I'm still in Bangkok, and this reporter from Italy shows up, I would pause. It's like, oh my God, do I want to be in a, oh, it's happening too soon, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Be aware. Make that effort. Now, I have to say a couple of things I think that are important about what you do with this material. About what you do and what happens after you unlock the secrets. Because it's about, again, unlocking a secret. And again, it could be the perfect recipe to make ravioli with mozzarella, bufala, whatever, okay? You're unlocking that secret. Sometimes it's important, other times it's less important, but you're dealing with people's lives and honors. This is what you're doing. The moment you're publishing something with a name and a family name and maybe a picture, it will be the life of a person who's there for everyone to read. So with whatever it is that you're doing with an interview comes responsibility. Now, a person is not very articulated and can go on for an hour, and you have to extract these quotes, right? You need to figure out where they're going to go, and you can juggle. It's okay. If a person tells you something that's brilliant on minute 2 of the conversation, then tells you another thing that is important on minutes 48 of the conversation, it's okay to put them together. You can do it. As long as you're faithful to the way this person speaks, maybe the accent this person uses, maybe the lingo of his trade, it's okay to put them together. But the most important thing is that you do represent, you fairly represent his opinion. And if sometimes you kind of are in doubt and you're like, okay, am I doing this correctly? Am I being fair? Is it something that I should know more? If you're not sure, if you have one hint of a doubt, call back. Because at the end of the day, it's about the honor of the person you're interviewed, and it's about your honor too. Because you do not do this to misrepresent people. You do this because it's important to have their voices in your paper, and you're writing about whatever it is that you're writing. And it could be about these women, and this is very sensitive stuff, but it could be about, really, not only about the sex change guy, it could be about, I don't know, the baker across the street who charges $1,000 I don't know, 1,000 was lire, no, €1 for a bagel, and then you write it in 60 cents. That's not cool, right? Yes or no? Whatever it is that you do with people's lives is very important. And you cannot kind of never forget about this. Because otherwise you might as well go to the stock market and make money on Wall Street. Because all of this, by the way, doesn't pay, so you might as well do it properly. Do we have any questions? Have I talked long enough? Have I bored you long enough?
Hi, thank you for coming.
Hi.
There's a, I don't know if you're familiar with like series like Serial or The Jinx or like How to Get a Murderer. So recently in America, there's like a rise in popularity in like crime investigative like journalism. One example is like this journalist for This American Life. She like found this really old case from like 20 years ago, and then she like called this guy from jail, and then they kind of started talking, and she went back and like checked a lot of like maybe kind of like fact checks information, and he talked to a lot of people that were involved, and she like did this whole story on it, and because of that they reopened his case, and like they started looking into this case again. So I just want to know, like, do you have any experience with like crime investigative journalism of some sort, and like why do you think people are so intrigued by stories like these, and I guess like any tricks to like investigating stories like this? Thank you.
It's a bit wide as a question. I think crime stories are very thrilling because they're thrillers. They want you, they hold your attention because there is a mystery that you have to unlock. There is a secret, and so the whole plot is based on figuring out what happened. And it is a useful metaphor, this one, for the whole talk, actually, because I think the things that we are, in the end, very passionate about are the things that we do not understand and that we want to kind of get a grasp of. And so a thriller, it's just like your life could be a thriller if properly told, you know. The thrillers are just lives very properly told with some sort of mystery. But you could write beautiful, you know, mysterious stories about anything, about these guys here in a cell in Africa, or about probably, I don't know, a garden or an exotic species found in a garden in Florence. It's mysteries that mesmerize us, I think.
Do you often have to ask photographers to leave because they're like freaking people out? And I'm just wondering if you could talk about how to take someone from, I don't know how to phrase this, when someone is very aggressively not wanting to talk to you, are there ways that you can kind of like calm them down and get them to talk?
Yeah, it's always about waiting long enough. And it's about understanding why. You know what, the proper answer to your question is understanding why this person is not talking to me right now. The moment you have an answer to that question, why is this person aggressive or not talking to me, you have also the solution. Some people don't want to talk to you because they might have something to hide. So if their behavior, if they're not talking to me because they have something to hide, then, you know, triggers my curiosity, and I'm after them like there is no tomorrow. So that was the wrong thing to do on their part. Some people don't want to talk because they're overwhelmed. I don't know. Typically, I did 2 stories in Italy in 10 years. Another one was about a murder mystery in southern Italy. A 15-year-old was killed. It was a family kind of matter. But anyway, the whole country the whole press pack went to the south, to this place in Puglia. I was living in Istanbul, and again, you know, I'm this outsider, and my editor calls me in Istanbul, and like, Sara Scazzi, why don't you go there, you know, and talk to the mother? And I arrived there, and it was like, it was a desert. It's like the people didn't want to talk. They hated the journalists. They didn't want to talk to the press. This is everything wrong that was possibly doable was done. To the extent that when I went to a restaurant and I asked for the check, they told me it was 40 euros and then the bill was 50. And I'm like, why are you giving me a 50 euro bill if it's 40? And it's like, yeah, you know, you can buy cigarettes. It's your magazine in Spain. So my colleagues were openly stealing on their expenses by teaching. It was that kind of thing, okay? But I'm meandering. The point was, no one wanted to talk to me. I understood why no one wanted to talk to me. My colleagues were just too much to deal with. They're not the most sensitive bunch. And so the way I did it was I stayed there calmly. I waited and waited and waited and explained. At a certain point, I produced some of my stories. I explained that I was an alien from Mars, that I was normally reporting on war zones and other stuff, and waited and waited and waited some more. And then in the end, a lot of people talked to me because it was about trust. They needed to trust me. They needed to know that I was not one of those arriving in a restaurant and asking for a 50 euro bill when it was 40. I was not one sensationalist reporter who would play with their words just to feel like, you know, a star on TV or in a magazine. They need to understand that I was made of a different mold, that I was coming from a different school. And once you establish that trust, then a lot of your work is done. Other times, no, most of the time is about timing, really. If you stick around long enough, they get to know you. In the Middle East, I was like, I got an ulcer almost because I was drinking so many coffees, you know, right? Ismail is gone, but yeah, so many coffees, man. It's like, Turkey, ala tool. I mean, it's like coffee after coffee and after coffee. And you drink the coffee because you have to drink the coffee because it's a specialty. But people also need to get to know you and trust you. And I think I told you, I said this story in another workshop when I went to Kobane, and there was this woman who was the commander of the forces in Kobane. She was a woman, and she didn't trust me at all. And I spent hours with her with my notebook in my pocket. She didn't want to tell me anything. She wasn't saying literally anything. And I arrived there at 9 at night, and I left after midnight. My notebook was still in my pocket. And in the end, after 3 or 4 hours of coffee and tea, I thought that she was kind of mellowed down. She felt a bit more comfortable. I looked at her and said, may I take out my notebook? Can I take notes? She said, yeah, sure. Of course you can take notes. Yeah, it only took me 4 hours and 20 coffees. Trust. Go back with an open heart. Take heart. Be nice. Tough. Nice. Doesn't mean that you have to be weak. Nice means decency. Be decent. They need to understand that you're fair. I think it's a matter of fairness. They don't trust that you're fair. You need to establish your fairness. Let them understand you're going to be fair.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
for doing this talk. I was just wondering, you spoke a lot about how you interview the victims, but I'm assuming, having reported on war zones, you also talk to the bad guys of the situations. How is your approach different when interviewing like criminals or something of the like?
I'm relentless. I mean, but there it's pretty straightforward. The reason why I dwelled, I think, on the victims is because what you see around is the opposite of what I'm describing and suggesting and recommending here tonight. So this is the reason why I wanted to really talk about this. But when you're talking with someone, and then you have to describe a bad guy, but for example, if you're talking about a warlord, for example, or a corrupt politician or a general or someone that you know is not really a nice person, then you just go, you just go you're straightforward, and you're there, and you just ask a question after a question after a question, and you don't cut to the chase. You just go, so are you dealing with drugs? So do you think it's a good idea dealing with drugs? So you have your policemen cutting opium in Badakhshan while you are the ones basically, getting it on the other side and getting rich. How did you build this house? This is a very poor country. Your house is very nice. Where did you get the money from? You see? You don't have to be aggressive. You're just kind of factual. You're there. It's like, huh, interesting. Would you like to explain that?
Hi.
Yes. Hi.
What does it feel like as a journalist to cover and open your heart to so many moving and very, very personal stories, and then go home and have to move on to the next story the next week? How do you deal with that kind of transition?
I have a shrink. Very useful. Even though it's schizophrenic, my sister's giving me a hard time. She teases me because my life is completely delocated. Is there a verb? Delocation? I don't think so. But anyway, because my shrink is in Beirut. I teach at NYU in Florence, and I work for Vanity Fair, and I'm Italian. So, no, seriously, you suck it up, basically. And the way you do it, you transform it into a piece. You do it because you think it's worth it. It's tough. But you do it because you think that it's helpful and important. And the act of writing, of transformation, of taking all of this pain and transforming it to a story that people read, that is widely available, that is enormous, because that means that these people right there are not only victims, but that they're people, we can share their pains. Last time I was here, it's interesting, I met Musa. Musa, you probably listened to his talk, the Afghani guy, the director of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission. Then we had breakfast. It was very funny because we were staying both at La Pietra and at the villa, and I wake up in the morning and he's already there and I don't know who he is, and it's two of us over breakfast, and I don't know who this guy is, and in the morning I'm not really the nicest person to see around. It's like afternoons are better for me, so I'm like, who are you? and he's nice and jovial and smiley, and he's like, oh, you're the famous Imma. Very shrewd guy. It's like if you interviewed someone, I would have done exactly the same thing. Very shrewd. Flattering can work to a certain extent. It's like, hi, and who are you? Musa, we had a conversation. It was lovely. He's a very nice man. He does a tremendously important work. And at a certain point, he said, you know, if people like you stop coming to Afghanistan, pause. His eyes were watery, pause. Then it means that not even in 5,000 years will come out of this. What he meant is that it's people like me, or maybe like you one day, who function as mirrors. There is someone that reflects their reality. It's not staying there. You can dehumanize people, but if you tell their stories, they're no longer animals, they're humans again. And it's you with your pen or your camera, whatever it is, that gives them back humanity. Now, it might sound rhetorical, but it's true in the end. And he made me think about that, Musa, here, having breakfast in the morning. Yes.
Recently, Sean Penn interviewed El Chapo.
Oh my God.
And he was...
He apologized eventually, but yeah.
Yeah, he was heavily criticized, though, for taking a sympathetic view, some felt, towards this drug lord, and the fact that he made concessions in that he let El Chapo see the interview beforehand. I just wanted to get your opinion on the matter.
I never show my interviews beforehand. I thought there was a sham. I thought that a New Yorker journalist, a New Yorker reporter was approached by the PR of El Chapo before Sean Penn was, and he turned it down. I mean, a professional would have turned that down for so many reasons. Well, an embed with the criminal wanted by FBI and afterwards police. I mean, it's like, no. And then maybe, or if you do it, then you do it by establishing the ground rules. The rules of engagement. Okay, so great, exciting, wonderful. I want to interview Hitler before 1945 and he gets killed and he kills himself. Fantastic. Okay, how we're going to do this? Tell me what are the rules of engagement. I lay down my rules. I'll tell you what I can do and what I cannot do.
You talked about how important trust is, but on the other hand, do you ever like doubt what your interviewee is telling you, or like do you ever, how important it is to like fact check, or like can you tell if someone's lying?
Yeah, well, that comes with experience. And that comes A, if you've done your homework, B, if you know your turf, and B, with experience. And then it depends on what kind of source you have. Who is the person that you're interviewing? Little people, and when I talk about little people, I'm talking about people who are not in an office, they normally don't lie. People who do not have an interest in lying won't lie, right? So this is the reason why they're so precious. People in an office, yes, of course you have to doubt them. You have to write down what they tell you, but then you have to know how to put them in context. And now also, yeah, totally, to doubt whether they're kind of uttering nonsense. But to know whether it's nonsense, you need to know your turf, right? Thank you.